Right, welcome to today's 301. And today, Tabby and I wanted to work together to kind of give y'all a preview of our upcoming series of classes that are going to start in February. So, we mentioned this in the last couple of classes. We're going to start a series of classes called AI and the Author, and they're going to be a series of fix my classes. So, like fixing my dialogue, fixing my characters, things like that. They will be very specific for each class. So how in the 101s, 201s, 301s, we try to cover everything, whether it's in Sudowrite proper and all the laser tools or inside Storyboard, but we try to cover all that at once. In these classes, we're going to take it almost like a box or a feature at a time and go through. And again, it's going to be a mix of AI theory and writing craft. Tabby, is there anything you would like to add about what they can expect?
Nope. That's basically it. Is we are just going to Nicole and I are basically here to help you guys, if you're struggling with the boxes or what they do, how to improve maybe some of your prompts and stuff. That's what we kind of want to do with everything and we're going to share our experience, our experiences with writing with AI. My history is and I was a writing instructor for a long time, so my history is a lot in the writing craft, so you guys will see I get stuck in it. I love developing characters. I love helping improve outlines and then looking at dialogue. Those are the things that, I love doing. So that's kind of the things we'll be focusing on.
And we do hope it'll be like an interactive session. So for our first two rounds, we expect the first round to be people, kind of curious, okay, how are these classes going to go? We're going to show you our works in progress that still need some tweaking. So we'll look at, so let's just say we're working on the characters. We're going to have these stories already done. You're not going to have to wait for us to flesh out a story. We'll just go straight to that character box and we'll start walking through, okay, what can we change here to make the output better? What kind of ideas do we need to come up with? What do we need to do and how do we need to word things for the AI to work with it as well? But for the second round, we will be starting a story and we'd like to make it a class story so that everyone, if they want to, will be working on that same story. And we will do the same process of going through those boxes again, except now we will all be working on a similar story and y'all can kind of get that hands on experience. But we do want it to be very interactive. Y'all are welcome to share your stories. Like if you're having trouble with something, you're welcome to share your screen. Say, hey, can you help me with this right here? We just know a lot of people are uncomfortable with sharing their stuff. That's why we're going to start off showing our own works in progress. So today for this 301, we're going to go through two stories. We're going to look at this Wizard of Oz one and kind of go through all the boxes. And then we will go back to that horror short story so we can focus on the beats box too. All right, so to kick it off, Tabby, is there anything we need to know about the brain dump in terms of writing craft?
I would say just remember that like your brain dump, it does feed in. So like, if you want like certain descriptions or if there's certain elements of your story that you want included in chapters, but not in others, make sure to put those in and then take them out. The AI, feeds off of it. So you want to make sure especially when you're creating your beats, if you want that brain dump to read that, make sure it's in there. If you don't want it in there, make sure to take that out. That's my biggest, I guess, put in brain dump and take it out. It's really great. It is really great to get your story started. Just remember it still affects your story through the beats. It's not just I write the synopsis and I'm done. No, it still affects. The AI still reads it. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. And that's why you'll see a lot of us too we'll do our brain dump and then once the synopsis has been generated, we will actually do a different version of the brain dump for all the stuff we want that story to kind of retain, whether it's lore, magical objects, extra information, just things like that. So it isn't a matter of once it's there, you're stuck with it. No, change it up if you need to. I used to tell people to make sure you put your genre here as well, since synopsis used to not go by the genre. It used to not see that. Now they changed it so synopsis does read from the genre, but I still recommend putting in some style elements if you know you need those carried over. We know the AI has this tendency to be very optimistic. So in my brain dump, if I know I want my synopsis to go as dark as I can, I'll put, hey, I want the style of ominous, foreboding tones, tragic endings, or just the all is lost kind of feel before, when synopsis gets generated. So you can put those in mind. If you don't have the details for your story like this, you don't have all these details, but you want to write a fantasy, you can put epic fantasy or whatever kind of a fantasy you want and just tell it you want it with, I did this before, with humans, elves, dwarves, and orcs. It'll create a story with all that. You do not need a whole bunch in brain dump. I just love to max out those boxes. But normally, this is in here to generate my synopsis. But normally, once my synopsis is generated, I take all of this character stuff out because that's then in my character box. And this room can get used for other things like plot points or additional details. Any questions on the brain dump? Alrighty. Genre and style, Tabby. What do people need to know about these for in terms of writing craft?
So, in terms of writing craft, I, again, would change out your genre. I would change it out. Remember that it is reading it. So, if you have elements of science fiction in your story, but you don't want it throughout your whole story, remember to take that out. It's also if you have elements of mystery, like let's say a part of your story as they stumble across something and they need to solve that before they continue, put that in. Same for romance. If you have a scene where you want two of your characters to be romantic, but the whole movie, or sorry, the whole we're sorry, we were talking movies. Your whole novel isn't romantic. You don't have to keep romance in throughout the same thing. Same for your romance novels. If you have a scene where it's not going to be romantic, it is much more action focused, take out the romance and put that in your genre. And it's the same for style. I recommend I'm always changing my style. Like I'll actually change out for each. If I know a certain character is it from their point of view, I'll make sure to change it because it affects that beats and prose. So you know that it's from a different character's point of view, or if you know that a certain beat is from it, pause your beats, go to that beat, change out your style so that it's also reading it. Again, from that perspective of you want the AI to read, not get confused on what it's supposed to be doing. Change your genres and change your styles to match what it's supposed to be doing exact. The AI reads it every time before it starts generating. So if you change it, it reads it right away. So continue that prompting and in that way it won't mess that up. I'm hoping this makes sense.
It does.
And then we've also learned too that sometimes minimal in those is best. I mean, you can absolutely fill up those 40 words very, very easily, very fast. But if you like a little bit of play with your AI and you like the AI to kind of give you ideas, then yeah, don't keep those boxes focused. Keep them minimal. And then that way the AI might generate, I think sometimes it gives better prose. It doesn't feel so locked in trying to stick with your prompts. It keeps the AI and I think helps it write better, especially in ones like unfiltered.
All right. So, in terms of the AI and using Story Bible, it's actually pretty much everything Tabby just said, just kind of looking at it from a different perspective. So, when I first do my genre box, I load it up with all of the elements my story will have. Let me pull up this one real quick. Hopefully, it has it here. I might have deleted it. So, there's all of these different things I can put into my tone and mood. I'll typically put those in genre as well. So there's all of these themes if I want to include those and the tropes. Also, let's say I'm doing I like to do my dark mafia romance. Well, there tends to be some violence. So I'll have a lot of action, like action fiction here in the genre. So my first thing to do in the genre box is load it up for all of the elements that my story will have, everything I want to bring in. And I do that because this affects the outline. So once I've generated my outline, I do just like Tabby says, and I then focus on, okay, what does this chapter or this scene need? And I change those up as needed. Same thing for the style, except I don't need to load it up in the beginning, really. Style definitely needs to get changed before you generate beats because it does affect beats. I think some people forget that. And like Tabby mentioned, change this up. Whether you're doing a romance, whatever other your major genre, main genre is, change it up. Okay, what genre fits that chapter? Because people have generated beats. Everything looks fine with the beats. They go to generate prose, and next thing you know, they have some kind of sci-fi story. And it was supposed to be. That's an extreme example, but because again, they may have loaded up this style box with everything they wanted for the whole story, and then they didn't think to change it for per chapter.
Yeah, and I'll give an example of that. I was writing a zombie story, and no joke, suddenly they're talking about portals, and I'm going, "Where is it getting this?" And that's when I looked in my genre, and I had put in sci-fi in there, not thinking that, "Oh, it's trying to pull in science fiction."
And that's a good example. I always give the romance versus horror analogy. So again, your genre is going to affect your those beats as well and your prose. So if you knew you wanted a mix, or if you had horror right here, but you have your opening chapter where there's not that whole horror aspect going on, maybe it's just the introduction of the characters, but you either have some kind of horror up here in your genre, or if you're like me, you like to use bloody depictions of gore in your style box. Well, guess what? Those characters, that group of friends that's just out partying and having a blast, somehow, some way, there's going to end up being a scene with bloody depictions of gore. It might not be in your beats. Nowhere in there, your beats will look great. You will generate that prose. Next thing you know, a tree branch falls on somebody's head, butts it open like a watermelon, and you're all mad at the AI or the model. Oh, it doesn't listen. It didn't follow my story. No, it did. You had in your style box, you wanted that bloody depiction of gore. It gave it to you. So be very careful with that and switch it up. And again, since it affects the beats, change it up before you generate your beats for this.
Yeah, I especially as writers, we have a tendency to think it's down. I know it's a fantasy story. I don't need to change it, but these boxes actually needs to be much more fluid than you're used to doing. Cuz we do, especially when plotting, we go, "Nope, I have it down. This is exactly what I want. I know exactly what I want." But see, the AI doesn't think like we do. So you know it's a fantasy story, but it doesn't know that you want action in this scene and more romance in this scene and you want a little bit of mystery in this. It doesn't know that. So that's why I say keep your boxes fluid and constantly changing them instead of feeling like they're static and they have to stay that way to get what you want. You won't get what you want if you keep them that way.
And remember, your genre can hold not just the main genre. You're looking at subgenres, themes, and tropes. All of that can go here in your genre box. I tend to avoid themes and tropes after I generate my outline, play around with it. I avoid it after that point because I find a lot of times the prose pulls from whatever theme or trope I have very heavily. And if y'all have learned
Mhm.
anything from my classes, y'all know I hate mushy sounding stuff, but I find it does pull very heavily in the prose from that. So just something to play around with. And as we mentioned the other day, there were different kinds of fantasy. So you see here, I have dark fantasy. So if you just have fantasy in your genre box, that's it. You are giving the AI a lot of leeway. You're, I can tell you right now, in my opinion, I think if I just have fantasy in here, the AI is just going to lean towards a bunch of magical beings with magical abilities and everything. That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, very Lord of the Rings kind of stuff.
So get specific. Do you want dark fantasy, epic fantasy, high fantasy, urban fantasy? Do you want sword and sorcery? That can still be, fantasy. So what aspects in that fantasy genre do you like? Both the genre box and the style box have what's called recency bias. So if you're loading these up, if your style box is getting maxed out for that chapter, keep in mind the last words have more of an impact than the others. It doesn't completely ignore the rest of it. Don't think that. It will read everything. However, it places more emphasis on whatever's towards the end of that box in both of these. That's why you see me always put things on lines like this, because I will typically have all of my elements, and then I'll switch them out. So if I have my dark mafia here, actually, I usually put it like this. If I have that violet scene, I'm going to tell it I want action. In my style box, I'll have extreme violence or something. But then I maybe want to take this out for the next scene, put the action up here or the mafia in action up here, have it focus more on that dark romanticism. So that's why you'll typically see me put all of my stuff on lines like this, just so I can easily take it, drop it in at the top. I know I still want these aspects in here. If I don't, obviously I would take it out. But I know I still want them in here. I just want the more emphasis now on the other stuff. All right, synopsis. Abby, anything we should know about synopsis box?
So this is a strange one for me because synopsis was always something you wrote after you wrote your story. That makes sense. It was the thing you put on the back of your book. So after you'd written your story, you'd want to sum up your story into a synopsis. And then, then that would be the thing that goes on the back of your book. And so for me, this is a weird switch to change it into you actually just put it in the front. I recommend, so to me, this is more like a blurb. This would be what you'd send. This is what you're going to send your editors or what you'd send as a query letter. You want your entire story in the synopsis. Don't end it in a cliffhanger. You want your entire story in synopsis because it is feeding into your character box, your outline, your beats, all of that stuff. It feeds into those. And so you want to make sure that you're filling out the entire story inside of that synopsis. So I'm one who it's okay to max it out. You wanna make sure it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, at least in the beginning, so you know where your story's going when you're first generating. And then this way, this is also important. This is the first start where character names can start appearing. So if you need to change your character names, make sure you're doing that in this box. If you don't like one of the plots, change it. If there is something very important in your story really needs to happen, add that into the synopsis. That way the AI has that to start generating down further. Like, start here. This is the start of your story. So try and give the AI as much information as you can to work with. You don't have to, obviously, if you're writing, you're like, I just want to get something down. Absolutely. You know, I usually still would pay attention to the synopsis. Synopsis is still one that I would pay attention to because it does feed into so much. It's the start. It's kind of the jumping point of your story, if that makes sense.
And I think I agree with every word you said, including the whole blurb aspect. Um,
Okay. I know to
mm,
me it's weird to hear synopsis and it have an ending because the
right.
synopsis is technically the thing that goes on the back of your book, and the blurb is technically the thing you send on a query letter that has your full story. But
So you see, our synopsis is generated from BrainDump, and it now looks at genre, which is awesome. So that's why you'll see me put things like my characters. Again, you'll see me go through a couple of versions of my BrainDump. If you actually watch my entire process, my first version is just all of my story details, all hitting all of those major plot points. Then I have a prompt to where it gives me this breakdown that you see in my current BrainDump with the scene by scene and the characters. And I like to throw that in there because, like Tabby said, I want to have my specifics in the synopsis box. So you can see brain dump is just that rambling. Put whatever you want in here. And then synopsis is intended to kind of make sense of all of that. Try to put things in order. So of course you need to check, make sure, okay, is everything happening in chronological order? If it's out of line here or out of place here in synopsis box, guess what? It's going to be out of place inside your outline. So double check that. You can see I also have my prompt here because I know that I like my outline formatted a certain way. I like my characters formatted a certain way. So I put that instruction here in synopsis since it does feed into my character box and outline. I know it's going to read these instructions and listen, hopefully. So, like Tabby said, this is like your first major stepping stone. Read through your synopsis, make any edits, add in any additional details. I always like to rewrite it to give some extra details, max it out if I can. Since I also like to put this prompt here, I've slacked down on, maxing it out as much just so I have room for my prompt. but I like to for it to pull in those specific character names. So if I didn't have character names in my brain dump, my synopsis likely isn't going to have character names. So I would actually go through, change it all up, and I would do that for brain dump as well. Go through them and put the characters' names. Maybe I haven't decided yet. Maybe I need to generate my characters box before I decide. Once that is done, though, I want to say, okay, I like this name for my main character. I'm going to go back into both brain dump and synopsis, put that character's name in, not just a he, she, or the protagonist, whatever. I'm going to be specific. I find it makes a huge difference when it comes time for the outline. If I've put in some locations here, if I put in those specific names. All right. One of your favorite sections, Tabby,
I
character
know, right?
box.
I could get lost in this section for hours. So this one, I am a character story driven person. I love books that it's about the characters and not so much about the plot. I like getting lost in the people and I mean, who hasn't gotten so lost in a book that you felt like those characters were like your best friends? You're like, I would totally hang out with these people. And so to me, this box is one of the most important boxes in any story. Your characters are the life, the heart of any story. There's very few authors who I think have been able to pull out just plot driven. So, especially when you're first starting out, develop your characters. This one is especially like your names. When you first generate through the AI, it can give you kind of what we call like our AI cliched names, Sarah, Johns, and sometimes it is based on the genre, and you'll see, you know what, this is the 4th time I've come up with Alex. Why is there always an Alex in my story? Things like that. This is where you would want to start changing those names because, again, you don't wanna have to go through your entire document and change them. This is now also where you do your character descriptions if you would like those. I'm one of those who I like to keep my descriptions pretty vague. I don't need to know their exact eye color. I don't need to know the length of their hair. That kind of stuff to me isn't important. I think getting into the story is, I mean, if you're having a story about a girl, she wants to become a warrior and she's this scrawny little skinny thing. Yeah, that's important. To me, that's important. That shows how much further she has to go, but I don't think it's necessary at all times to give full physical descriptions. Sometimes in romance, a lot of the readers like it. They like to kind of know what those characters look like. I like kind of feeling them, that's how that person makes me feel. I'm more of that description. And those are things that you can add into your characters box as well. Same thing for personalities. So you want to add in not only their strengths, but also their weaknesses, add in their quirks, add in things that maybe one always ends their sentences with A. I live in the UP and everyone up here ends their sentences in A. Don't you know A? That's just what
Well,
we
that
do
was a
up here.
Canadian thing.
Well, we're right next to Canada, so I think that's where it came. So I think but if you have one of those characters, then, add in that quirk. If you know a specific way that they talk, if you know that they have a disability, if they wear glasses, if they walk with a limp, if they walk with a cane, if they're missing their pinky finger, those are all things that you can add in into their characters. Those are, if they have tattoos, add those in. This is also where I would add in. I told you guys I was going to get lost in this box. This is also personality types. So whether you go by astrology signs, anagrams, Myers-Briggs, if you want to add in those, absolutely add those into this character box. You'd be surprised how well an AI does with going, he has a Scorpio personality. You'd be surprised how well the AI actually sticks to that. Some of the other things is dialogue. If you know certain things that they say, if I always wanted to make a character who constantly he constantly used common phrases, but in the wrong way. Like the killing two birds with one stone, or actually, I'm trying to think of other ones. But things like those, just common phrases that everybody uses all the time, and him always saying them but misusing them. Someone who's maybe speaks more lyrically, You want them to speak soft, those kind of things. Those are all things you can add inside of your character box. And then I also like to add in, like, if they have hobbies, like if they love walking, if they're a great hiker, if they're a reader, they always have a book in their hand, things like that. To me, those are things that are important and make them individual and gives them personality. And the same thing, goals to me is the most important thing you can put in your character's box. I am a huge every person that had wants something, is trying to go for something. Okay, so that's why that to me, the goal of that character drives the story. That goal, even though they might have an overall, like, let's go back to the girl who wants to be a warrior, her overall goal to be the greatest warrior of all time is great, but how is she going to do it? She has to start with smaller goals throughout the story. So if she, like, let's say she needs to get into, a warrior academy, and she has to learn to fight first. So her first goal is to get into this academy. So, whether she has to send off letters or she has to actually audition or she has to go in, prove herself through, fighting, she has to win a contest, something, she has to do something first. So that's her first goal. That would be the goal I would put in and keep in here for however long it takes her to get into that academy. Now, once she's in, so let's say the inciting incident is she gets into that academy. Well, now her goal is going to change. And now what is it going to change to? You know, now she needs to learn how to do hand to hand, or now she needs to learn how to fight with a sword or even lift a sword, especially if she's tiny and that sword weighs as much as she does. You know, goals now change, and so now you can change your goals inside of your character box to help feed in to that outline, to help feed into that prose so that the AI knows, oh, this person's goal isn't this. Yes, she always wants to be the greatest warrior, but she also had little goals she has to meet before she gets there. Anyway, that's my that's my kind of spiel. And I love everything that Nicole has here too, especially dialogue. You know, don't be afraid if they add in dialogue.
So I disagree with Tabby on very, very few things. I can only think of one out of everything she said that I, as a reader, will say, I want the descriptions. Please, please give me descriptions. I need to know the color of their eyes, the color of their hair. Is it longish? Is it short? How is it done? Just because I have found in a couple of books, when I read, I imagine the scene playing out in my head like a movie. And if I haven't been given that description, and for whatever reason, I can't make it up on my own. When I see that scene playing out, I have this creepy, blurred out figure that's, talking and doing all of these actions. So I do like descriptions. I will say, and I think Tabby covered this as well, you don't need the physical descriptions like in chapter 3. Once you've introduced that character, the reader knows what they look like. Take out the physical descriptions. Otherwise, the AI is constantly going to be mentioning her curly brown hair and bright blue eyes and a determined expression. The format for characters, as you can see, I have a lot of stuff here just for one character. All you really need is the character name, colon, and then the description. So we have asked Ryan Mather to clarify this, and he confirmed. The AI is smart enough, it looks for a name and a colon. So all of these different lines and tags, all that with colons, it doesn't matter. The AI doesn't think this is a new character. It comes down here and sees another name, colon, and says, oh, okay, this is a new character. So don't be afraid to play around with the formatting. Bring in all of those things that you like. Just because I have all this doesn't mean you need that, obviously. I have discovered that having this line of dialogue, to me, pros made their dialogue more unique versus when I just had things like this before. Everyone still sounded kind of the same. Once I started putting in the actual line of dialogue of how I wanted that character to speak, it made a huge difference. So, some other things, play around with this character box. Decide what kind of things you want here. I know plenty of people just prefer that one little paragraph. And like I said, I don't do the goal, motivation, conflict like Tabby does. Instead, I break down so I know how my character arcs are going to be. I have my overall character description, and then I break down their arc per book or whatever I need per series. So some characters, if they're going to have a whole series where they're the main focus, they're going to change throughout the series as well as the book. Just like Tabby said, they're going to be constantly changing. So what I like to do is have that overall arc saved somewhere, but then I also modify it so I can go back and look, okay, my character should be around this stage right now for their arc. But then I'll just have a line here within their character description this will fit another story, but we'll do it for this one. So I might have a line here when I get to the next chapter, like say chapter 2 or 3. Dorothy can't find Toto and is wandering around Oz looking for him. So I can actually put things like this in my character description. This isn't a great example, but things to note how my character is feeling, whatever changes they have. In that Vampire Slayer story, I will make a note of, okay, my character is starting to have doubts, starting to not believe everything she's been taught, things like that. So you can just put a simple line here to change up your character descriptions. Biggest complaint is the words, the limited amount of words. They are working on changing this. So a bigger box is coming soon. I think you are going to love it. We will be able to easily modify. So if I know I want this, I will no longer have to actually prompt the AI to give me this format. I can just tell it once. It'll keep doing that for me. Y'all will be able to customize this galore, but play around with the character box. And we are going to have a character specific class in our series that's coming up. So we can talk characters for the entire hour.
But just quickly, I like to also just delete characters that are not in the scene. Like chapter 1, if the scarecrow's not in it, take him out of the character box. Not only does that give you more words, but then the AI doesn't throw him in when it gets confused and needs a character. That's just another hint to you.
Yeah. But keep in mind too, as long as y'all are not using pronouns and beasts, that should not happen. So let us
Yeah.
know if it is. So they can
Yes.
look into that. All right, the outline box. Tabby, you're up.
Okay. So this is another one I kind of get stuck in. I will try not to, but the outline again is it is where your book is going. It is where your characters are going. I I love that Nicole has in here an actual time, actual setting. Those are so important. The AI doesn't always pop those out, and it will because it doesn't know. It will just put your characters wherever it feels like. So make sure that you're doing like, to me, you wanna know if it's daytime or nighttime. Daytime scenes have a much different feel than nighttime scenes, and as people, we experience the same thing, so it's important to put that time in. I'm the same for locations. The location of a story, if something happens in a cemetery, it's not gonna be like sitting in a coffee shop. So that to me, time and location are very important to add into to that outline. Same thing for, like, you want to describe here as much of the scene that you know. So once it pops it out and it gives you an idea of the scene, and you're like, okay, I really like this scene. I like where this chapter is going. If you have ideas or you know that there's something you want to add in, please do. I know that I'm all about what is the purpose of this chapter? Does it have a purpose? Is this introducing the characters to the reader? Then it's important. So make sure that the AI knows, make sure you introduce, each one of these characters in this chapter. Or is this action focused? Is this where your climax is happening? You need to make sure to put in so that the AI understands, you know, what is the purpose of this scene so that you it's also so that why would your readers care? Why would your readers care about this chapter? I find that I put that in at times too, because I think that it's important for my readers to understand, why did I keep this chapter in and not just throw these scenes out. So that's one of the things that I just make sure I give as much information in my outline as can, because this is the starting point to you actually writing your chapters. How about you, Nicole? What do you do in the outline?
I love my outline formatted like you see it. I'm actually playing around with another format too, but it'll still be mostly like this. But it's actually going to have kind of similar to what you just talked about. Okay, what is the purpose of this chapter? I kind of want to have that, but it still is something I'm playing around with. What I want people to understand A lot of people complain about the amount of words in the outline, not enough. And I don't want y'all to change your process. If maxing out that chapter summary or maxing out that outline box for 1 or 2 chapters is working for you, great. But if you're unhappy with how your beats are coming out after doing all of that, I highly recommend changing up your method. Doesn't mean you need to format it like this, but instead of having a whole bunch of information in that chapter that the beats has to focus on, try playing around with it, having just a couple of plot points for those beats to focus on. Again, that's just if you're unhappy with the beats. If you're satisfied with your process, you're loving it, by all means, please stick with it. As we've covered and we try to hammer into everybody, there's a very specific format. You need to have Act One. I don't need this. I have to have Act One right here. This tells the AI, okay, this is the start of the outline. If I have chapters up here in front of Act One, guess what? It's not going to recognize those. So we need Act One, not a Roman numeral, the number one. And each chapter needs to be chapter, number, colon. The rest does not matter. It can be a paragraph. It can be the way I formatted it. You can tell it to generate 10 to 15 beats, however many beats you want for that chapter summary. So the rest of it is very customizable. Play around with it. I also like to do some style input here in my chapter. So I might put something like specific descriptions to. So I will put instructions like this inside my outline, because then when my beats get generated, guess what? It's looking at this information too, but I've also told it to have a little focus right here and to do something. And it does a pretty good job of paying attention to this. So if you're writing a murder mystery, you're interrogating a witness, or the detective's interrogating a witness or something, and you want to really focus on the detective's suspicion and how that witness just seems antsy and nervous and everything, you can put those style instructions right here, and your beats will listen and pull more of that information and have that heavy focus like you want. All right, so beats. I've harped on my stuff enough. I'm just going to repeat myself, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tabby. I go back to the one that's the header. So you could put a beat header here, not required. If you don't need it, don't put it. Your beat header can be so many things. A lot of people like to put, hey, in the last chapter, this happened, and they'll put a chapter summary right here. A lot of people will reinforce some style, especially when they're trying to do first person, like with the unfiltered model. They'll put right in first person here. You can tell it again, focus on such and such. You can have guardrails and instructions inside this beats. I'm just going to put random stuff. Again, it's not going to fit, but I can tell it. So I can do like that. If that fits that beat and I know, hey, really pull this out, I can do that. I can also tell it instructions like we've done in one of Tabby's class in here. I can tell it to do that. There is so much you can do right here in the box, and you have 2,000 words. We can't stress this enough, y'all. This is why, in my opinion, it's okay that the outline is limited, because once I realized, hey, I can put so many details here, everything I can imagine in that scene, it'll fit here in this box. And I no longer need to try to cram it into my outline. Because again, why cram all of that into my chapter summary when I know I'm only going to get 12 to 15 beats? They're not going to be able to pull all those details. So I have to turn around and add in those details again, anyways. So this is where I really just focus on putting in all the details. I know it sounds cheesy, but I just sit here and I'll like close my eyes again. I'm one of those that reads and sees things as a movie, so I try to do it for my own stories as well. I close my eyes and I try to imagine that scene playing out in my head, and I put every little detail. If you don't specify something, but you say something happens, guess what? You're telling the AI, hey, I give you permission to make something up. Do what you will. Whatever specifics you have in mind, put them in the beat. You can put lines of dialogue. Again, you can put the instructions. I can put this character says this other character reacts this way. I really like to fill this box up whenever I have a really detailed vision. I think I average about 1,600 words per beat, or for the beats box. And a lot of mine will typically look about this size, just because, again, I'm putting in every detail because I know I want the scene to play out this way. I mentioned it the other day. I have in my Slayer story she's at an altar. And I described the altar and how it looks. The reader doesn't necessarily need to know that. That's going to be like just a passing information thing that'll come into play, but it's not like this major story thing. So why do I describe it in my Beats box? Because I don't want the AI to make up the description. I've told it, hey, she's at this altar cutting her palm, to announce her induction into the ritual. I don't want it to decide how that altar looks. I'm going to tell it the altar looks like this. And if I don't want the description in the prose, I'm just going to edit it out. But I've saved myself the headache of the AI making something up about this altar and changing the direction sort of the scene. Get rid of your pronouns. Lily and Rose stand in their late grandmother's attic. That's simple. Yes, it is. But you know what? I'm still going to change that. Lily and Rose stand in Lily and Rose's late grandmother's attic. I do not care how many times I have to repeat a person's name in a sentence. I will repeat it because there's many times we think the sentence makes sense, but guess what? The AI thought something else. You said a man. So the AI said, well, let me go grab a man for you. It went to your character box, grabbed a man and placed it in that scene. And then you're like, this character is not supposed to be in the scene. I didn't name them. No, but you said a man was there. So what's the AI to do? And you're thinking, well, I just wanted it to say a man. And there's things that we'll go over there in the beatbox to handle situations like that. But be specific. It'll also might bring in like some random character, not even in your character box, some unknown person. That's happened to me a couple of times. And that's when I learned get rid of the pronouns. I think that's about it because we can go over more whenever we get to that class. I am turning it over to you, Gabby.
Mine, I have to agree with everything that Nicole said. I loved when we played with that add a text, right out of the text when we played with that in my chapter. And it wrote out the text. So before it was just saying he received a text from so and so, and then it would move on in the story. And I was like, well, what does the text say? Like, as a reader, I want to know what the text said. So that's why we wrote that out. And so we were saying, write out that text, and it really does do it. I say give these as much information as possible. So think of if I told you guys, I want you to write a scene. I want you two twin sisters arguing over a mirror in their grandmother's attic. If I told you that, all of us would write it very, very differently. That, you're all me just giving you that prompt, you would write it out differently. Now, what Nicole has here with like the extensive paragraph, like standing in their attic, there's a mysterious antique mirror. Go into describing it if you need to. They start arguing over the mirror, claiming it is their own. The older sister reaches out and touches the mirror, feeling a strange energy. If I give you this prompt, I guarantee your writing will be so different from what my first prompt was, because our stories would start sounding a little bit more the same. I mean, obviously, our own voices would come out and it would be different. But if you are that specific in your beats, you are going to get that beat. The AI will follow it better. So if you know you want this exact, absolutely fill out that beat. If you're okay with the AI giving you its idea of what twins fighting in their grandfather's attic is like, then absolutely stick with something a little bit simpler. But if you have a deep understanding of where you want this chapter to go, the more information you feed it, the better the AI stays on track, if that makes sense. That would be my advice for beats. Again, there's nothing wrong with you putting up guardrails or focus. If you want something specific in there, obviously you adding in, like Nicole did, write out a text from Lily's boyfriend. Obviously, the AI in the midst of their fighting is going to have to find a way to put in that text. And we're the same. Well, I don't know where it needs to go, but I know it needs to go here. Put that in. That's exactly how I would do it. And then same for headers. Put in as much information as you can. Sometimes there's not that cohesion from chapter to chapter. It could be because you don't have the additional chapter information. So it has no idea what happened prior. So it's just going to go off of what your beats say. So if you really want that chapter glue, that chapter, like what happened in the last chapter into this one, put it in the header. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't leave things vague unless you're okay with the AI taking over and writing it for you. So for me, I would put in, if you know there's an event, the character has died, and you don't want that character brought into this next chapter, except for written, like talk about maybe past tense, put that in there. There is nothing wrong with telling the AI. The AI cannot read your mind, you guys. It can't do it, and neither could I. And so, if you told, what would you give someone if you want this story written? What would you give a ghostwriter even? What would you have to tell them to get the story back of what you wanted? And you have to think the AI is much more basic than actually giving it to a professional ghostwriter. It's more like giving it to, a junior writing assistant, maybe in like a 12-year-old. How can you get it so that it stays on track and gives you the information that you want the most? So that is my advice for doing beats. And again, when Nicole and I go into our classes, we'll get much more in depth in creating good beats, creating great outlines and characters and stuff like that. That's what we want to do with these. And so for now, we're just kind of giving you guys an idea of what these classes will be like coming up. But you know, we want you guys to be able to go in tonight and start writing your first story. That's what we want. So that's kind of why we're giving this overview of what each of the boxes can do and our advice, especially because you want the best result. That's why you're in this class. How can you write things out to get those best
Hey,
results?
that's okay. We're pretty much at time. And just while Tabby was
Yeah.
talking, I tried to kind of just do an example of what she was talking about just to give y'all some ideas here. So you can see how you can do different things. So, if they're talking about somebody who's dead, we don't want that character being brought in. So I can clarify to the AI again, like I always say, I don't want to give the AI the chance to mess up. Yeah, you can chance it. Maybe it'll get it right. But there's also a very good chance it's just going to have their grandmother come up the stairs and start, bring them milk and cookies or something. So I want the AI to know, hey, she's dead. And I don't want it to say, oh, she got hit by a car. Nope, died from natural causes 2 weeks ago.
And especially because it's reading horror, it might have things like she was murdered,
That is
and
very
you're like, no,
true.
that's not how I wanted this to go. Yeah, I love that you put died of natural causes.
And there was things here we could get specific here. And guess what? If you don't know these ideas, but you do want to, you decide, hey, you know what? I want to decide what the mirror looks like. You have these lovely tools up here like describe. So I can just copy this. I would copy this beat right here. I would probably highlight that and click to have it described what it looks like. So y'all can turn around and use those laser tools right there in your beats to, get some details in that and everything.
Yes, because mysterious antique mirror could be anything from handheld up to full body, a full wall mirror. How big did you want this mirror? How big is this mirror that they're arguing over? If you know specifically, I know exactly what size this is. I know that it has a bright gold frame, then you need to put all that in.
Hi, yeah, we have been here for almost an hour and a half. Thank y'all so much for hanging out with us today. I hope y'all enjoyed this session. Again, this is just a preview of kind of how we wanted the classes to run. So if y'all want to stick around after I stop the recording, give us some feedback on if y'all like the way this looks like it's going to go, or, say, hey, you should probably do this as well. I'd love to hear it after we stop the recording. But for those who have to hop off, thank y'all very much for being here. And I hope to see y'all again soon. Bye, everyone.